But tonight, we're really happy to have Richard Louv, a San Diegan, celebrating the launch of his newest book, Noticing: Intimate Encounters with the Natural World. Somehow, Richard learned or felt or understood through his experiences in nature that many humans, especially children, were suffering from what he has termed as nature deficit disorder. Nature is authenticity and history and life. Slow down. Recognize the natural world. Bring in the natural to open up your senses to balance the heat of concrete. Richard Louv is a journalist, and I worked with him at the San Diego Union Tribune years ago. And he has other colleagues here from the newspaper in the audience, which I think is really cool. He's written 10 books, which is really remarkable, and congratulations, including Last Child in the Woods, Saving Our Children from Nature Deficit Disorder, The Nature Principle, Reconnecting with a Life in Vintage Age, and Vitamin N, The Essential Guide to a Nature-Rich Life. Through all of his books, he looks at our interactions with and in nature, whether it be hiking or birding or just sitting still without your phone next to a creek. He is co-founder and chair emeritus of the nonprofit Children in Nature's Network, which we'll hear about soon, which supports a new nature movement. Richard has worked for the New York Times, or written for the New York Times, Outside, Orion Magazine, Parents, and many other publications. He's often on national radio, which, by the way, I've heard a few of your podcasts, and lectures throughout the world. In 2008, he was awarded the Audubon Medal, which is quite a prestigious award, because prior recipients have included Rachel Carson, E.O. Wilson, President Jimmy Carter, and Sir David Attenborough. Richard will be in... Yes, congratulations. Oh, and Robert Redford, because he's... of course. It's his twin, of course. You know, they hang out on the river together. Richard will be in conversation with Dr. Ron Swaisgood. Everybody sway. Who serves as the San Diego Zoo Alliance, Wildlife Alliance, as the Brown Endowed Director of Recovery Ecology. Dr. Swaisgood oversees several species conservation programs locally in SoCal and around the globe, among many other conservation initiatives. You know, I feel like we should all be on top of Mount Woodson or Mount Iron Mountain for this talk, don't you, instead of in a bookstore? But that's okay. I guess there's a lot of paper in here. But before we get started, we have Sarah Milligan-Toffler, right here, President and CEO of the Children and Nature Network, the nonprofit organization that Richard Louv co-founded nearly 20 years ago. Following the publication of his groundbreaking book, Last Child in the Woods. I think there's one more copy over there. We are so pleased to have Sarah and staff from this national nonprofit with us tonight. And here to tell you more about their work is Sarah. So say hi to Sarah, Richard, and Ron. There we go.
Well, she kind of, you sort of said all I needed to say. So, it's wonderful to be with you all this evening. As was mentioned here, Rich and some friends of his, after he wrote the international best-selling Last Child in the Woods, they started the Children in Nature Network with really a simple and urgent idea, which is how do we turn around this trend of the indoor childhood. And unfortunately, Rich, 20 years ago, I recently reread Last Child, and you really predicted kind of where we are today, unfortunately. Like, what's going to happen if we don't get kids connected to the outdoors, connected to their communities, connected to their friends and peers. So here we are 20 years later, and I will say that we've made a lot of progress, but there's still a lot of work to do, obviously. The progress that we've made is that the Children in Nature Network is now currently supporting coalitions of leaders in communities, 100 communities around this country and some countries and communities nationwide. And we are working with these local coalitions to build their capacity to green school grounds, to green early child care centers, to bring nature play into our parks. I mean, if you go to a lot of our parks, there's not a lot of opportunity to connect to nature, which there should be. So we are on a mission to continue to grow and build that work. Over the next 10 years, this organization is committed to creating the conditions where 20 million children that currently lack regular access to nature have that in their daily lives. And I just want to say that that is going to take every single person in this room and every single person that you know joining this movement. And so I invite you to do that tonight. I hope you will check out the Children and Nature Network's website at childrenandnature.org. There are many ways to get involved, and there's going to be a lot more coming out in the coming months and years about ways in which you can get involved to help advance this movement. So I think that's all I'm going to say. I'm here. My colleagues, Monica, Keith, and Laura are here, and I encourage you to come find us if you want to find out more about our work. So I want to say one word, too, about Ron being part of this conversation. Ron and Janice are good friends of Rich's and good friends of the Children and Nature Network. Janice used to work with us. And I think about the work that you do every day, Ron, to notice what it takes for a species to survive. And so you, not only because of your friendship with Rich, but because of what you do every day, I just feel like you're the perfect person to be having this conversation about noticing. So thank you for what you do.
Well, thanks so much. I spend a lot of time noticing budgets these days. But
All right, take it away.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here with good friend Rich Louv. Do you want to go by Richard since it's a professional setting?
No.
Okay. We're here to talk about this book. It's amazing. It's profound. It's thoughtful. It's inspirational, like everything Rich comes up with. I know it was painful at times. I think I had a few dinners with you when you were in a I'm never gonna finish it phase, you know. But it's paid off. It's a wonderful book, and I'm really excited to be here and chat with you about it today. So we'll just dig right in. I think, first and foremost, Rich, you're a storyteller. So I'm here just to offer a few prompts and let you tell us your stories. So the first one I'm going to ask is, why did you write Noticing, and how did you pick the title? But before you answer, will you indulge me to read a quote from your book, your words? Because I think it is very relevant here. I did dog ear it. You probably don't like that.
Oh, I like that.
Okay. So this is from chapter 27. When I was 3 or 4, I was playing alone in the quince orchard outside my grandmother's house in Independence, Missouri. I was running around. It was cold, and I was wearing one of those hats with ear flaps. I came to a little ditch and jumped over it. Memories are tricky, I know that. But in the middle of the jump, I froze in the air, looking down at the leaves submerged in the water, in the clear water. At that instant, when the world stopped, I had an overwhelming feeling that there was something I needed to do in life. Then the world returned, and I completed the jump. That's it. And it's kind of like blah, 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 life happens for a paragraph or so. And then in 2005, when Last Child in the Woods was published, I was on a morning radio show discussing the separation of children and the rest of us from nature, a deficit that many of us were beginning to recognize. And the calls started coming in. In that moment, as clear in detail as the first memory, I knew I had done at least some of what I was supposed to do. But of course, the work had just begun. There's a lot of great quotes. I think that's one of my favorites in your book. But yeah, so hopefully that'll set the stage for a discussion of why you wrote this book.
The part that you skipped told how
It was vital.
told how into my 50s, everything I would do, being a columnist for the UT and yearbook editor, all kinds of stuff, and I would ask myself, was that it? Did I do what I was supposed to do? Nope. So into my 50s, I kind of felt that I failed. as illogical as that is. And that's why that moment was really important. And to me personally, that's why it's so important that you're here. Thanks. Oh, you ask a question.
Yeah. Why did you write Noticing, and how did you pick the title?
Kathy and I, and by the way, this is Kathy and my son Matthew up here. We moved to Julian right at the end of the pandemic, or close to it. And like a lot of us, we felt isolated and, housebound, all of that. And everything had changed. And I was walking in our neighborhood, which is actually just a few houses on a big hill. And for those of you who don't know Julian, there are mountain lions in our yard, and I love saying that. But I was walking, and I was really missing my former life with the newspaper, and really missing journalists, some of whom are here tonight. Journalists, I believe, are the smartest and most irreverent people in the world, and that's a good combination. But I really missed being around them, and I realized I also missed going into a room where I was supposed to interview some politician, and walking up and noticing that there was a red pen in his pocket, and then noticing that his shoes are dirty, and noticing how people looked at him. And I would collect all of that detail, and I would take it back to the computer or the typewriter, and that became the color of the story. So I missed noticing, because the joy was not in the published story. The joy was in the noticing. And then I was remembering my childhood, spent so much of it in nature, noticing. And so I thought I'd lost it. But then I realized I had been noticing a row of wild turkeys right in front of me. And I had been noticing all the details of their feathers, the iridescence, the chicks that were, is it chicks for turkeys? Yeah, Ron's the biologist, yeah. And
he's just sitting there.
Close enough.
And I realized that I'd been noticing.
It's a murder of turkeys.
It is. It's a murder of turkeys. No.
Murder of crows.
Crows.
But that's not a baby.
So I wanted that back, that sense. It had never left. I still had it in me. But I wanted to expand on that. And I wanted to find again the awe and the wonder that I had when I was a kid in the woods with my dog, noticing. So, by the way, I'm really glad Ron is here, because he has real degrees after his name.
The piled higher and deeper degree.
Yeah. No, he's an impressive guy with all kinds of accomplishments and degrees. And all I have is a BS in journalism, which is true, and I thought kind of appropriate.
Yes. Okay, we can move on to the next question now. Well, I'd like to talk with you a little bit, Rich, about the word connection, which I associate that word with you a lot in your work. You write so deeply about connection. And it seems to me that when you're in the book Noticing, it's a natural extension of that reconnectedness to nature that you wrote about 20 years ago in Last Child of the Woods and in several books since then. Then at that time you were focusing on trying to get us to rebuild our connection, but you seem to be expanding that message to really encourage us not just to connect with nature, but to connect more deeply, more spiritually, more profoundly. And I think that's where Noticing comes in. So can you talk about the evolution of the depth of the natural connection that you're addressing here and Noticing?
Well, one of the reasons that Kathy and I moved to Julian was to deal with our own nature deficit. And living in a more natural place, and this can happen in the city too. I mean, this can happen in an urban park. Came to realize how much detail that we were noticing. Our house was in the middle of an acorn woodpecker colony, and I learned more about acorn woodpeckers. That everybody raises the kids. It's not just the parents, and that openings happen. These are actually families, not more than they are colonies, but they become colonies after a while. And in order to get into that colony, if you're a woodpecker, if an opening happens, you have to go there and you have to fight one of the woodpeckers there. It's kind of like a boxing match. And all the other woodpeckers, not only from there, but from around the region, come and watch. Not all of them, but some of them. I'm not answering your question.
So in the book, you speak a lot about, some of your more recent, I think you were going that direction, deep experiences. And so the word noticing, it's more than just connecting. It's taking the time to really absorb nature, use all your senses, and that sort of thing. It seems like that's what you were really targeting in this book more. I mean, that's always been, an undercurrent in your writing, but I think, that's where you really focused on that, that sort of an elevated connection with nature.
It's a little hard to describe the relationship. I mean, paying attention is part of it. But in order to pay attention, you have to first notice something. One of the first interviews or settings that I wrote about in the book, one of the first chapters, Janice Smith, if you could raise your hand. She's a remarkable nature educator and nature therapist, and I went with her and several women up Vulcan Mountain, which is one of the biggest mountains in San Diego, and it's the oldest mountain range in San Diego. And we can see that from our front window. And Janice took us up the mountain, and it's more complicated than this, but what she would do is give us an assignment to go out and find a tree and sit next to it and come back and tell us what you learned. There was a series of those kind of questions. And then she would blow on a flute. And that was a signal for all of us to come back to a circle under a tree. And then people would tell their stories, what they had learned. One woman said that she went and found a tree that had fallen, and she felt the pain that tree had felt. But she also felt the pain of the trees that caught it. And there was lots of stories like this, and as they went on, I started thinking, this is familiar. These are fairy tales. Just the way they were telling them and the form of them. And I wondered, where do fairy tales come from? There's something deep within us that does not want to be alone. And I think that this may be at least one of the sources of fairy tales. We go out into the woods and we notice things that we don't notice we're noticing. Some of the research in the last 15 years that has grown immensely is the research on human senses. We don't have 5 senses. We've got, at least according to the scientists, 9 or 10 human senses. And some of these scientists who study the senses talk about 30 or 50 or even 100. Now it gets complicated because senses work with each other and sometimes they get confused. I mean, some people can When they hear music, they see colors. So it's a lot more complex than we think, how we perceive the world. It's also a lot more complex world than we think. Another body of research is growing very fast, is about the complexity around us, the civilizations beneath our feet, the mycelium fungi that connect whole forests, and trees communicate through that network, that internet of nature. And it goes on and on. Every day you pick up a magazine or a paper, you'll see a story that somehow fits into there. God, I didn't know that. I didn't know bees talk to each other through electricity or whatever. So that has grown at the same time that knowledge of our senses has grown. It's also grown during the same period in which our awareness of our loneliness, our species' loneliness, has increased. And we don't want to be alone. During the pandemic, I got letters and email from people who were housebound. And they noticed, many of them for the first time, that there were birds in the trees outside their windows. Now, they had seen them before, but had they deeply noticed them? Had they deeply appreciated them? And many of these letters were quite moving about how it changed them. The main thing it did for them, housebound, they did not feel so alone. So, I'll stop there.
Wonderful. I'll share a quick story about COVID. I developed a habit that I continue to this day that I love and brings me great joy. And it's kind of related to your sit spot, except it's kind of a little walk spot. I do have one spot I sit. But every morning I would get my cup of coffee, and instead of like running over and trying to crank out a few emails, I would walk around my yard. We're fortunate enough to have an acre with boulders and oaks and native plants, and I'll just enjoy so I still do that for about 10 minutes every morning to start my day. And yeah, I think I was channeling your book before you wrote it. But. So where did the book, Noticing, where did it come from? I mean, how did your experiences and background lead you to write such a book?
Well, we already talked about some of that. It was kind of Kathy's and my turn to notice. I'd written about everybody else, but hadn't written about my own deficits. And so this is a more personal book. And a lot of it is rooted in the Julian region. I go way beyond the Julian region and interview experts around the world on the phone or on the computer. And I wanted to understand what it was when I was a kid that I was doing. There was a big field behind our house. I grew up at the edge of Kansas City. And that was right past the hedge. And then beyond that old cornfield was woods. And a little creek went through there. And it was a big area. And beyond that were farms. And I spent much of my boyhood in those woods with my dog Banner. And my parents often did not know where I was, but Banner always did. And he would go home and tell my mother when I was up to no good. But I remember being so entranced by the detail, climbing trees and I'm sure that you've done this, looked at the little grooves in the bark and seen it, transparent tiny spiders and aphids and all that life going on, all that mystery that you don't normally notice. And it was a lot more than that. When we dug an underground fort, and where the spade went down, you could see all kinds of tiny little roots and a worm or two that had been cut in half, but they were still alive. And the smell of the black Midwestern earth. All of that just became part of me. And the first chapter is called The First Place. All of us have a first place. And it imprinted on us. And if we were lucky and privileged, like I was, you had a natural place. But within cities also, kids notice the falcon nest on the ledge on the building across the road, the street. They notice the ants, just as I noticed the little insects and the grooves of the tree bark. They notice ants coming through the separators of the sidewalk. And if noticing is valued by their parents, or maybe if they're really lucky, a teacher, their imaginations will go there along with the ants. So I wanted to recapture that for myself. And I think moving to Julian, we did.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rich. Yeah, I was just, as you were speaking, I was thinking of my first place, and it was a treehouse in the little side lot by my yard. And that was probably my first deep experience with noticing, because I would just climb up in my treehouse and I would just sit and just watch. So it was also my sit space. So I think those experiences shaped who I am and what I do. Yeah. So my next question is about, are you hopeful that people who read your book are going to understand more the value of spending time in nature and go out and, use all their senses, 9, 30, 100 senses, to experience nature and come away with more compassion and appreciation for nature?
Well, obviously I hope so. Otherwise I wouldn't have written the book. But by the way, I left out something on the fairy tale thing. Our ancestors went out into the woods and they noticed things that they didn't know they noticed. Using all of these senses, and they probably used way more of their senses because they really didn't want to go to brunch with a bear. So they had to see or sense, smell, hear, whatever, the presence of the bear. And but throughout prehistory and history, we made stories out of that. We do what humans do. We anthropomorphized what we saw, even what we didn't see, and turned it into human form, into elves and leprechauns. And so I don't deny the existence of elves. They just come in a different form. I think that the forest is enchanted, but not in the way that we have heard. It's enchanted by all of that life, all that great conversation going on around us all the time. And if we can hear that, we can be part of that conversation if we notice.
I have a related question. What impact do you hope that your message is going to have for conservation and for the environment? And I'd like you to talk with us a little bit about your ideas for the new nature movement. How does that differ, and how does that improve on and build on the traditional environmental movement?
I hope it deepens it. One of the things that I wrote about in Last Child was the fact that environmental organizations were doing, holy work, but children were usually not part of that. Sometimes they gave kids kind of a lip service. Nor was this deeper experience part of it. Now, there had been writers that had written about it, of course. So I want this new nature movement, which involves health and physical, mental, cognitive health, is absolutely necessary for us. And to get that health, nature is absolutely necessary. So I'd like that to expand, and that would deepen, I think, the traditional environmental movement. I think, to me, the new nature movement, which is about adults too, incorporates the traditional environmentalism and deepens it, but both on an individual and a wider spectrum.
Wonderful, thanks. Where did you get a paperback copy of this book?
This one of the,
I didn't know it was out in paperback already.
It's not.
no, this is one. Notice climate change less when we moved up there. You notice it more. All through the forest when we moved in, there were giant grand oaks. And within just a few months, a couple of years, now you see something that looks like elephant graveyards all over the place because a beetle got into the oaks and they all died, most of them, this particular kind. And the interesting thing is the disease hits the big oaks first. So the idea that we can somehow escape by going somewhere, it's all around us. Whether we call it just biodiversity collapse or whether we call it climate change, it is happening. So a new transcendentalism would recognize that we don't escape, but we have to change it. So that's one area. The other areas, specifically we made a lot of progress with pediatricians, for instance. They're now starting, or it started a few years ago, prescribing nature to the families that they see. Sometimes even writing out a prescription slip. And that's happening across the U.S. It's happening in Canada. It's happening in some other countries too. The other thing that changed, many things changed, and I hope this book leads to the echoes of that change and other forms of it. When I wrote Last Child, which was published in 2005, I could only find 60 studies in the whole world about how nature experience related to people's health and well-being. 60. And I had a couple of really good academics who knew what they were doing help me look. I thought, how could something so large have been ignored for so long by the academic world? There were some great pioneers out there who were not ignoring it. But something so fundamental to human experience, how could that have been ignored? One of the pieces of good news is that today, if you go to the Children in Nature Network website, and you go to the research library on that website, you'll see, I always forget the 1,600 studies. 1,600 studies now, abstracts, independently done, that we arranged for those studies. So within 20 years, it's really become a growth industry, and they're still coming in every month. So I hope on this idea that there's a deeper level of conservation, a deeper level of experience in nature, that begins to get the same kind of attention. I also hope the schools change. That kids are taken out to experience nature, not just to learn about the science of it. A brief story, I was at a nature center some years ago up in the upper Midwest. It was really neat, a lot of land around it. Wolves would come through there. And I asked people there, the teacher was standing in front of me, she was all in khaki, and a wonderful teacher. And I asked her, what's the biggest attraction here when the kids and the parents get here? And she said, the pond. And I went down to the pond, and the pond had a zillion frogs that, of course, as you approached it, boom, they all go in the water at the same time. So I asked her, what do you do when you take the kids down to the pond? Well, we test the pH of the water. And I said, do you ever take the kids down and just sit down and wait for the frogs to come back up? and then imagine what it's like to be a frog? No, we test the pH of the water. The guy standing next to me, to her, told me later that she can't go there because she's under so much pressure on the state, local, national standards. And it's a little bit like what happened to biology in 8th grade. Now, I was the snake kid. I mean, I was the one they called to get the snake out of their yard, the neighbors. And I knew a lot about it. I knew the names of a lot of the things. I would watch them and see how they lived. There was a study a few years ago of indigenous kids in the upper Midwest. And they found that those kids were really good at biology before it was called biology. They were really good on this, knew a lot. And then they hit 8th grade, like I did, and they turn it into math. They turn it into laboratory experiments, testing the pH of the water, all of which is very important. But what about sitting there and imagining what it's like to be a frog? And absorbing that in ways that you can't even explain. What if schools did that? You know, all those senses. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of kids that would like to explore their super senses. So that's one area I'd like to see change.
Wonderful, thanks. Yeah, that reminds me of our lunch conversation today. Environmental education, as wonderful it is, it kind of misses the boat sometimes. And there was an article a few years back by David Sobel, I think it was called Look, Don't Touch. Did anybody read that? And the whole point was that too many of these, it's a lecture on a trail. You know, you come in, you have a PowerPoint presentation, then everybody goes out on the trail, they march in a line, and they're learning, but they're not experiencing, they're not noticing. And yeah, I think that's a really important pivot for us to have in education and, of course, in environmental education. And one other comment, 1,600 papers. Rich, I know you can't claim all of them, but I think your work, your book, was a catalyst for a lot of that work. So, yeah. So our last question, let's talk about hope. This is one of my favorite topics because I'm in conservation biology and sometimes we lack hope and then we try to figure out a way to engender hope for us, and so it can be rough sometimes in the trenches. But I feel like you're writing and noticing in other books. I mean, you hit upon some really depressing realities, but yet we still walk away with a sense of being uplifted and hopeful. So I'm wondering, in writing, noticing, what made you feel hopeful?
First, I should mention one of those trends. Several have come together. One of those trends was the lack of authenticity in our lives. You almost can't go anywhere without mistrust. You certainly can't go to Instagram, and I will confess I'm a little addicted to Instagram. You can't even go there. I have a theory that the only thing holding civilization together now is cat videos.
That's what she watches.
I watch a lot of cat videos.
Are they alive or dead?
But now you're seeing cats made up. AI. And no matter how many times somebody says AI in the comments, we're watching more and more of that. We're seeing a kind of AI in politics. Inauthentic, not real. Play acting, pretend.
So what about the hope?
Oh, yeah. Just trying to go a different path. I think that lack of authenticity is something that's going to bring a lot of people back to nature. Or I never say back to nature, I say forward to nature. And I think it creates even more hunger in many people to find something real. And it turns out it's pretty much all around us, but we have to notice it. We have to make an attempt, a conscious attempt. I'll tell you a story that gave me a lot of hope. Near the end of the book, I write about going up Vulcan Mountain with a guy that lives, I think, in La Jolla. And when he was a kid, his parents would take him hiking on Vulcan Mountain. And he had a real affinity for the mountain. And, the fires came through, the 2003 fire. So many of us felt such a sense of grief. Some people wouldn't even drive up there anymore because so much was destroyed. And it wasn't just the trees. It was the humus. It was the mycelium. It was all of the things that were under it. And there are vast areas up there that were basically sterilized. It takes a long time for a sterilized mountain to come back. So he spent years going up to the mountain on his own. He really didn't publicize this, with seedlings and planted trees up and down the side of the mountain. And he felt good about that. And then one day he found himself sobbing over his steering wheel at the base of the mountain. And the reason was he had suddenly realized the obvious. Vulcan will burn again. Now it might burn again even without climate change, but the odds are much higher. And it just tore him up. Years of work. But the story does not end there. He's been planting ever since. That was several years ago. He didn't give up. He didn't quit. There was a moment when we were talking that a memory of something that somebody had said when they came back. And I realized that, and he echoed this, that the trees that will grow, because he had some hope, for a while will make life better for people, but for animals, for other plants, for a while. And that's not nothing.
Yeah, that when I read that chapter, it definitely had a lump in my throat because it hit close to home with my life, my work. We often say, I have a slide that has a picture of Sisyphus, the guy who pushes the boulder up the mountain only to have it roll back down. And in conservation, that's how we feel a lot of the time, and that's why we struggle with hope and despair, gloom and doom. And I've written a couple articles in academic journals on hope. And one of the things we had to do was kind of redefine the word hope. It's not hope that the world's going to go back to this wonderful, Adam and Eve, nature living in harmony with people, although I hope we can get better. But it's that if you do something, there will be a better place for nature than if you do not. And so it's basically about making a difference. So yeah, I really appreciate it, and I'm glad you shared that story with us today. So with that, unless you have anything else you're dying to tell us, I think we can open it up and see if anybody has some questions for you, Rich.
I'm curious if you open randomly one of your yellow tabs, what you pull up.
What's your favorite passage?
I have one, but it's too long to read. I don't know. Look how many there are. How do you pick? But thanks for if you get the book, you can look for it.
Yeah, you should buy one or several for all your friends and family. No Noticing.
Somebody else have a comment?
Marty.
Not just,
I have a question.
yes.
Hi, Rich.
Hi.
I was just thinking when you kind of posed a question about at what point in time did we lose so much touch with nature? And I forget exactly how he was putting it then, Ron. Maybe you could help me. But do you remember? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And so what really occurred to me is that it's like my family were a bunch of farmers from Illinois, and it wasn't that long ago, and more recent, less than 100 years ago, when some percentage, like 90% of Americans, all still were on the farm. It wasn't that long ago, and it was like 90% of Americans were farmers, and so the thought occurred to me that maybe that was what's part of this timing of all this, because everybody was living on the land and was part of nature, even if they weren't noticing. The last thing they were worried about was getting back in touch with nature, because they were working themselves to the bone in nature every day just to survive. So it just occurred to me, and I wondered what you might think about that idea.
The 1980 census was the first census that did not give the number of small farms in America, because they didn't think it was important enough. There weren't enough of them to count. That's the period there were farms, but they became huge agribusinesses. Not the same thing. But in truth, our human disconnect from nature can possibly be traced to the invention of agriculture, in which we took ourselves out of wild areas and grew corn or whatever. But there are farmers that I have in here that have an intense sense of the natural world. There's also, I spent time with indigenous people, the Kumeyaay in that region, in the Julian region, and they still have this intense connection. Sometimes they feel they've lost it, but it's still there, a connection to the land, of the spirits in the land. And so I think it's still there. It's just underneath the mycelium. Rex?
Me?
Yep.
This is great. Today I spoke with some gentlemen at a camp in New Mexico, and the landholders of Hopi Reservation, and they're celebrating their 100th anniversary. And the executive director told me you were a legend in the world of camping and everything around. He knew he'd read every book you'd read. He knew anything about it. He was very impressed that I knew you personally.
And then you told him the truth.
The camp was formed in 1926 when a group of headmasters at small schools in the Midwest, including mine, got in Model Ts and went out and got the land and created this thing. And it's been going on ever since. And I had the privilege of going there as a 12-year-old in 1960. I didn't know who Kurt Vonnegut was, but he went there in 1938. And if you look at the front of Galapagos, which is, of course, a testament to nature, you'll see that he dedicates it to Phyllis Holly and the things that they did there. And so I spoke with him about these things. I thought about, I was a privileged kid, but many people are not. And around the same time, I opened an REI thing, and I saw this expensive series of clothing with peanuts in it. And I thought, oh, they're going to give money to sustainability and kids. Well, they weren't. Now, REI is a co-op. In 1970, I bought a 30 below zero sleeping bag from them because I was living in a barn outside of Aspen as a ski bum, and it was that cold, and I needed it. I could buy it then. You can't even come close to it. And you and I have spoken about this. How do we get the outdoor industry, it is basically preying on the children, if you will, to get more real about making it so more people can do it? Because you can't go out and do it.
Yeah.
You know, and kids want Jordans or Lakers or anything like that. This is an enormous thing that needs to be addressed. They can't buy it.
Yeah, I understand. There is a glimmer of good news. So Kathy and I went to D.C. a few weeks ago to the first conference of the outdoor industry. Representatives from about 150 companies, including REI. And it was the first conference that they had sponsored, and it's going to be an ongoing thing, about the relationship between nature experience and health.
And you spoke there?
Yeah. And
Very good.
I missed the chance. The Secretary of Interior was there. And I missed the chance to ask him if he cared about connecting people to nature.
I just want to point out, Rich was there receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable.
Okay. Hey.
I guess I have a comment more than a question, and maybe it's a little bit about something to be optimistic about, is that I spend a lot of time with kids, 5 to 15, out in the forest. And what I notice an awful lot of is that my favorite scenes is you'll see some kid, some 7-year-old or 11-year-old or 4-year-old, just off by themselves, just like looking at the view. And they'll spend, and they may be labeled ADHD after school, but they'll spend just 15 minutes enchanted, as I say, by the forest.
You have a new book coming out. Could you tell them a little bit about it and tell the name of it?
Sure. It's called Explorations in Ecology, Playful, Science-Rich Outdoor Activities for Kids and Their Adults. But it's really about what you're talking about, helping the kids make those deep connections and really pay attention and enact animals playing with each other and all of that.
And Pierre teaches kids about this in Idlewild. Somebody else? Yes.
Over the years, I've read quite a bit about Finland in terms of the extent to which nature is really included in their curriculum, so that the kids spend a lot of time outside.
And they're the happiest country in the world.
Yes.
Coincidence?
Exactly. And so just wondering if there are any school districts in our country that have replicated this. Just curious.
This is another piece of good news. 20 years ago, there was a handful of nature preschools. Today, there are several hundred, and that's another growth industry. And it's not only nature preschools, but I know there's one of the high schools here has incorporated a lot more nature into into their curriculum. I visited a school outside of Atlanta that ABC asked me to visit in order to do a piece about vitamin N. And that school, the kids spend almost all day outside. The classrooms are individual classrooms that the whole wall opens up to the outside. They have gardens and all that. And then in the forest around them, there are trails and learning trails. And they go out there and they learn about everything. They don't just learn about science. They learn about some of the things I've talked about, but they also write poetry under the trees. It turns out to be better usually than what they write in the classroom. And, that's an example, I think. And while I was there, by the way, there were two, I think, 13-year-old girls standing in front of me and the interviewer for ABC. And the interviewer is kind of like Ted Baxter, remember him? And he said, "So, little girls, what do you learn out there? And what do you want to be when you grow up?" And they both said writers. and that made me feel good.
Was that before ChatGPT?
And so Ted Baxter says to them, well, how would being out in the woods have anything to do with learning how to write? And they looked at him like, rolled their eyes in the best 13-year-old way, and said, don't you understand? Out here, everything is connected.
Okay, we have time for one last question, Rich, so pick well.
Thank you. He was a University of Kansas alumnus a few years before me, and I've known him since the late 80s, and I get to ask the impertinent question. First of all, the Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus ends with the comment, one must imagine Sisyphus happy. So you have to be happy to do what you're doing, or else you'd go crazy. In any case, to bring politics into this, have you found Republicans? Do you get more pushback from Republicans to your thoughts than Democrats, or can you speak to the Republicans in a way that they can buy into your theories?
You know, I won't say Republican or Democrat, but you know, I was in Austin a few years ago, and I was asked to talk to the biggest organization of ranchers in Texas. Texas has less public land, I think, than any other state. And these guys were hardcore. Before I went out to talk to him, there was one guy in the back, and he looked like John Connolly, you know, a lot taller than me, and leaned over and said, "What's all this I hear about," what was it he said? I'll think of it in a minute. Anyhow, then I went out and talked to these folks, and I talked about fishing, which I grew up fishing. My son is a champion fisherman, much better than me. He was a guide in Kodiak, Alaska, and you know, competed with the bears to show these corporate masters how to fish. Since then, he's become a vegan. True story. And I miss going fishing with him, but he said the other day that he would go out with a hookless fly, which is done by some people. Trying to remember the question. See, my head is going. What was it?
You were talking about the ranchers.
The different. Do you have a message that resonates on both sides of the aisle?
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
You know, have to recognize that ranchers do encounter nature. They know some things that I don't know. And people who fish and hunt, I don't hunt, but people who fish and hunt, they notice nature. Maybe not quite the way I'd like them to notice, but that's up to them. I've found, at least for the first decade of those 20 years, that when I would go and sit with groups of people, say around a table, who were trying to figure out what to do about nature and area, I realized that this connecting children to nature, at least, may be one of the last issues in America that Republicans or conservatives and liberals can talk about together. Not necessarily agree, but at least talk about together. It's one of the powers of this issue. It does bring people together. It's hard, but it does. But you can't just talk about your REI backpack, you know. The flip side of that is that people who live in inner cities, they have something to teach too. You know, it's not the best thing for people who look like me walk into an inner city neighborhood with their REI knapsack and tell people how to connect to nature, tell these kids and their parents. Many of them come from cultures, many of them are closer to that kind of intimacy with nature than many of us, because agriculture did not die as soon in those countries. And many of them grew up in villages, etc. So we need to learn some of the ways that they connect to nature that we don't know about. So I think you meet people where they are, as corny as that phrase is, and you learn from them.
Wonderful. Well, Rich, you're a friend, you're a legend. Thank you so much. This was amazing tonight. Thanks for sharing.
Okay. Hold on. Here we go. Okay, everybody hold them up, and if you don't have a book, give me good jazz hands, okay? Thank you so much. This will be great. Thank you. We appreciate it.